silk of Valeria Nightbloom's crimson dress whispered against her pale skin as she stood before the gilded mirror, her white hair cascading like moonlight over her shoulders. 22 years of living in the shadows of her sisters had taught her to make herself small, to dim her light so theirs could shine brighter. But tonight, the mate selection ceremony would change everything.
Tonight, beneath the silver gaze of the full moon, the Alpha King himself would choose his queen from among the unmarked Omegas of the realm. Her reflection stared back at her with violet eyes that held storms she'd learned to suppress. The red dress, the only beautiful thing she owned, had been her mother's, a final gift before fever had stolen her from this world.
Valeria's fingers traced the delicate embroidery along the bodice, silver threads forming patterns of night-blooming flowers, the very flowers that gave her family its name. The door burst open without warning, and her sisters swept into the room like a tempest of jealousy and perfume. Morgana, the eldest, wore emerald green that matched the envy in her eyes. Seraphine, only a year older than Valeria, had chosen gold to complement her auburn hair. Both were beautiful in the way that sharpened glass is beautiful, all edges and cutting light. Morgana's smile was poison wrapped in honey as she approached. The air in the small chamber grew thick with tension, with the weight of years of resentment. "Oh, Valeria," Seraphine cooed, circling her youngest sister like a predator. "You look almost presentable." Almost. Valeria's heart quickened, an instinctive warning that something terrible was about to unfold. She tried to step away, but Morgana's hand shot out, gripping her arm with crushing force. "Did you really think," Morgana hissed, her nails digging into Valeria's skin, "that we would let you stand beside us tonight? That we would allow your pathetic beauty to outshine ours?" Before Valeria could respond, before she could even draw breath to scream, Seraphine's hands were on her dress. The sound of ripping fabric echoed through the chamber like the tearing of her very soul. Morgana joined in, both sisters clawing at the crimson silk, shredding the delicate embroidery their mother had stitched with love and hope. Valeria struggled, tears streaming down her porcelain cheeks, but she was no match for their combined fury. They were larger, stronger, fueled by years of festering envy. The dress, her mother's dress, fell away in tatters, leaving her standing in nothing but her thin undergarments, exposed and trembling. "There," Morgana said with satisfaction, releasing her sister with a violent shove. "Now you look like what you truly are, nothing." Seraphine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The Alpha King will never look twice at you now. You'll be lucky if they even let you into the ceremony hall." They swept from the room, their laughter echoing down the stone corridors, leaving Valeria alone with the ruins of her only beautiful thing. She sank to the floor, gathering the torn pieces of crimson silk, pressing them against her chest as sobs racked her body. The moon rose higher outside her window, indifferent to her pain, and still she sat there, broken. But Valeria Nightbloom had survived worse than this. She had endured her sister's cruelty, her father's neglect after her mother's death, the whispers of the pack who saw her as weak. She had endured, and she would endure still. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. With shaking hands, she draped the largest piece of torn fabric around her shoulders like a tattered cloak. Her white hair hung loose and wild, no longer arranged in the elegant style she had planned. Her feet were bare, her skin marked with small cuts from her sister's nails. But her eyes, those storm-colored eyes, burned with something that had been dormant too long. Dignity. She would not hide. She would not let them steal this night from her, even if she went to the ceremony in rags. The grand hall of the Silvercrest Keep gleamed with 1,000 candles, their flames dancing across marble floors and tapestries depicting the history of the wolf packs. The unmated Omegas of the realm stood in careful lines, each one more resplendent than the last, dressed in their finest gowns, their hair adorned with jewels and flowers. The air hummed with nervous energy and barely contained desire. for tonight they stood before Alpha King Isaac Stormcliffe himself. He stood at the far end of the hall on a dais of dark stone, and the sight of him stole the breath from every Omega present. Isaac Stormcliffe was a man carved from legends and midnight storms. Tall and powerfully built, his presence dominated the vast chamber. His black hair fell past his shoulders in waves that caught the candlelight, and his beard was trimmed close, framing a jaw that looked hewn from granite. But it was his eyes that truly captured attention, silver like the full moon, cold and assessing as they swept over the assembled Omegas. He wore black leather and dark furs, the informal attire of a warrior king, as if even this sacred ceremony was merely another battlefield to conquer. Scars marked his hands and forearms, testimony to countless fights, to a life lived on the edge of violence. Everything about him spoke of power, of dominance, of an alpha male in his prime who bowed to no one and nothing. Beside him stood his beta, Marcus, and his council of advisors, all watching with varying degrees of interest as the ceremony began. By ancient tradition, the Alpha King would walk among the Omegas, and when he found his true mate, the bond would reveal itself, the air would shimmer with recognition, and the chosen Omega would bear his mark before the night was through. Isaac descended from the dais with the fluid grace of a predator, his boots echoing against marble. The first Omega he passed trembled so violently her jewels rattled. He barely glanced at her. The second tried to catch his eye with a coy smile. He looked through her as if she were glass. One by one, he walked past them, his expression growing darker, more remote, until the assembled court began to whisper. What if the Alpha King found no mate tonight? What if there was no Omega worthy of standing at his side? It was then that the great doors at the far end of the hall opened with a groan of ancient hinges, and Valeria Nightbloom stepped into the light. The whispers died. Every eye turned, and Isaac Stormcliffe, the Alpha King who had faced down enemy packs and rival alphas without flinching, felt something in his chest shift and crack open. She was devastation made flesh. The tattered remnants of a red dress clung to her pale form, exposing more than it concealed, yet she wore the ruins like a queen's mantle. Her white hair tumbled wild and free down her back, reflecting the candlelight until she seemed to glow from within. Barefoot and bleeding, marked with the evidence of cruelty, she walked down the center aisle with her head held high. And her eyes, those impossible violet eyes, met his across the vast distance of the hall and held. Isaac felt the bond snap into place with the force of a lightning strike. Every cell in his body recognized her, called to her, demanded her. His wolf, the savage beast he kept leashed with iron will, howled with need and possessive rage. Mine, it snarled. Mine, mine, mine. The other Omegas might as well have ceased to exist. The court, the traditions, the carefully laid plans of his advisors, all of it became meaningless static. There was only her, walking toward him through a sea of shocked faces, her dignity intact, despite the cruelty that had been visited upon her. Among the assembled Omegas, Morgana and Seraphine watched in growing horror as the Alpha King moved. He did not walk toward Valeria. He did not approach with the measured grace expected of royalty. Isaac Stormcliffe ran. His long strides ate up the distance between them, and before Valeria could fully process what was happening, he was there, towering over her, his massive frame blocking out the rest of the world. Up close, he was even more overwhelming, his presence a physical force that made her knees weak. Without a word, Isaac shrugged out of his heavy fur cloak. The garment was enormous, lined with black wolf fur, and marked with the silver insignia of the Stormcliffe line. He draped it around Valeria's shoulders with a gentleness that seemed impossible from such a fierce man, his calloused fingers careful not to touch her skin as he drew it closed, covering her, protecting her, claiming her. The fur was still warm from his body, carrying his scent of pine forests and winter storms, and Valeria felt something inside her chest bloom like the night flowers of her name. Who did this to you? His voice was a low rumble, each word precisely controlled, but she could hear the fury beneath it, feel it vibrating through the air like distant thunder. Valeria's lips parted, but no sound came. She was drowning in those silver eyes, in the intensity of his focus. No one had ever looked at her like this, as if she were the only thing in existence worth seeing. "Tell me," Isaac commanded. And it was a command, the voice of an alpha king who expected obedience, but his hand came up to cup her face with devastating tenderness, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't known she'd shed. "Tell me their names, and I will end them." "My sisters," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Morgana and Seraphine. But please don't—" She didn't finish the sentence because Isaac turned, his silver eyes scanning the assembled crowd with predatory focus until they landed on two Omegas in green and gold, whose faces had gone white with terror. His lips pulled back in something that was not a smile, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too dangerous. "Seize them," he ordered. And his beta moved instantly, warriors appearing from the shadows to grip Morgana and Seraphine by their arms. The sisters struggled, their earlier confidence shattered, replaced by animal fear. "No, please," Morgana cried out. We didn't know she was yours," Isaac finished for her, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper that somehow carried through the entire hall. "You didn't know she was mine, and so you thought it acceptable to abuse her, to tear her clothes, to send her to me, marked with your cruelty." He turned back to Valeria, and the transformation in his expression was so complete it stole her breath. The fury vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. His hand was still on her face, and now the other came up to frame her, holding her as if she were made of spun glass and moonbeams. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Valeria," she managed. "Valeria Nightbloom." "Valeria." He said it like a prayer, like a promise, like the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. "My mate, my queen." The bond between them flared, visible now to everyone in the hall, a shimmer of silver light that connected them, that marked them as true mates in a way that could not be denied or questioned. The assembled court dropped to their knees, acknowledging what the moon herself had decreed. Isaac Stormcliffe, the Alpha King who had never shown mercy to his enemies, who ruled with an iron fist and a cold heart, bent his head and pressed his forehead to Valeria's. The gesture was intimate, reverent, completely at odds with everything the court knew of their fierce king. "I've waited centuries for you," he murmured, and she realized with a shock that he was old, far older than he appeared. "I'd begun to think the moon had forgotten me." Valeria's hands came up tentatively to touch his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat beneath her palms. "I'm nobody," she whispered. You're everything." His voice was fierce now, demanding she believe him. "And anyone who made you feel otherwise will learn the price of such ignorance." He straightened, pulling her against his side with one powerful arm, while his cloak still wrapped around her. "To the assembled court, to the world," he declared, "this is Valeria Nightbloom, my true mate, your future queen. Any who show her disrespect, show disrespect to me. Any who harm her will answer to me with their lives. Let the word spread to every pack, every territory, every corner of this realm." His silver eyes found Morgana and Seraphine where they knelt between guards, trembling. "As for you two, your punishment will reflect your crime. You sought to reduce my mate to nothing, to steal her dignity and her place. Therefore you will serve her. You will be her attendants, her servants, bound to her will for as long as she allows it. Perhaps in service, you will learn the value of the sister you tried to destroy." Morgana opened her mouth to protest, but one look from Isaac silenced her more effectively than any gag. The Alpha King's mercy, it seemed, had limits, and they had very nearly crossed them. Valeria felt the weight of 100 stares, heard the whispers beginning to ripple through the crowd. But Isaac's arm around her was solid and sure, his presence a shield against the world. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. The ceremony concluded in a blur of ritual and tradition. Isaac never released her, his body a constant anchor as advisors approached to offer congratulations that felt more like assessments. The court was uncertain. She could feel it. Uncertain of this Omega in rags who had captured their king's heart. Uncertain of how the power structure would shift. But Isaac's certainty was absolute, and in the end, that was all that mattered. As the night deepened, and the crowd began to disperse, Isaac led Valeria through corridors of stone and shadow to chambers in the highest tower of Silvercrest Keep. The Alpha King's private quarters were sparse, functional, the rooms of a warrior rather than a monarch. Weapons lined the walls, maps covered every surface, and the massive bed was draped in simple dark furs. A fire roared in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the stone. Isaac closed the door behind them, and suddenly they were alone. Truly alone, for the first time since their eyes had met across that vast hall. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the bond that sang in their blood, demanding acknowledgement, demanding completion. Isaac moved to the window, his back to her, and Valeria could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid control he was exerting over himself. When he spoke, his voice was rough, strained. "I won't touch you tonight." Valeria's heart stuttered. "I don't understand." He turned, and the raw need in his eyes nearly drove her back a step. "The bond wants to be consummated. My wolf is screaming at me to claim you, mark you, make you mine in every way possible. But you've been through trauma tonight. Your sister's cruelty, the shock of the ceremony, meeting me. I won't add to that by demanding your body when you're not ready." Something warm and bright unfurled in Valeria's chest. This powerful alpha, this king who could take anything he wanted, was choosing to give her control, choosing her comfort over his own desire. "What if I'm ready?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, brave and terrified all at once. Isaac's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Valeria, I've been broken tonight," she interrupted, and her voice grew stronger with each word. "My sisters tried to destroy me, to take away my chance at this. But you saw me. You chose me. And I'm choosing you back, Isaac Stormcliffe. I'm choosing this bond, this life, this moment. Don't make me wait because you're trying to be noble." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face with that same devastating gentleness. "You are the bravest thing I've ever seen," he murmured. "Walking into that hall in tatters with your head high, meeting my eyes without fear. Do you have any idea what you did to me?" "Tell me," she whispered. "You broke me open." "I've lived for 300 years, Valeria. 300 years of war and politics and loneliness, waiting for a mate who never came. I'd convinced myself I didn't need anyone, that I was better off alone. And then you walked through those doors and suddenly, I knew what I'd been missing. Purpose. Home. You." His thumb traced her lower lip, and she trembled at the contact, at the barely leashed hunger in his touch. "I'm not a gentle man," he warned. "I've done terrible things. My hands are stained with blood, and my reputation is built on fear. But with you, I want to be different. For you, I'll be whatever you need." Valeria reached up to cover his hands with hers, holding them against her face. "I don't need you to be different. I need you to be real. Show me who you are, Isaac. All of it." Something in him broke then, some final wall of control crumbling. He lowered his head and kissed her with a hunger that had been building for centuries, and Valeria met him with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his long black hair. The bond between them flared bright as a star, and she felt their souls beginning to intertwine, 2 halves of a whole finally coming together. Isaac lifted her effortlessly, his strength overwhelming but never frightening, and carried her to the bed. The torn red dress finally fell away completely, and she should have felt vulnerable, exposed. But his eyes worshipped every inch of her, as if she were something sacred. Beautiful, he breathed against her skin. So beautiful it hurts to look at you. His hands, those scarred warrior's hands, mapped her body with reverent attention, learning every curve, every sensitive place that made her gasp. And when he finally claimed her, marking her as his mate in the most primal way, Valeria felt the last pieces of her broken self fusing back together, stronger than before. They moved together like a storm, wild and fierce and perfect. And when the peak came, it was transcendent, the bond snapping fully into place with a flash of silver light that illuminated the entire chamber. She felt him in her mind now, felt the depth of his devotion, his possessive love, his absolute certainty that she was his, and he was hers for all eternity. And she felt, for the first time in her life, completely whole. They lay tangled together afterward, his large body wrapped protectively around her smaller frame, his fingers trailing idle patterns on her skin. The mark on her neck where he'd bitten her throbbed with a pleasant ache, the physical proof of their bond. Through the windows, dawn was beginning to paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, but neither of them felt the pull of sleep. They were too alive, too connected, too consumed by the newness of having found each other. Isaac's fingers traced the small scars on her arms, the ones left by her sister's nails, and she felt his anger pulse through the bond. She placed her hand over his, stilling the movement. "They hurt you," he murmured, his voice rough with suppressed rage. "How many times? How many years did they make you suffer?" Valeria was quiet for a long moment, organizing thoughts and memories she'd spent years trying to forget. "Every day," she finally whispered, "in small ways and large." It started after my mother died. I was 6 years old, and Morgana was 9. Seraphine was 7. My father remarried within the year, desperate for someone to care for his daughters, and my stepmother brought with her a poison that infected everything. She turned in his arms to face him, needing to see his eyes as she spoke of things she'd never told anyone. She convinced my father that I was difficult, disobedient, when really I was just grieving. She gave her own daughters the best of everything while I got scraps. And slowly, my sisters learned from her example. They learned that hurting me brought them favor, that diminishing me made them feel bigger. Isaac's jaw clenched, and she could see the silver of his eyes begin to glow with his wolf's anger. What did they do? Everything, Valeria said simply. They would destroy my possessions and tell my father I'd been careless. They'd push me downstairs and say I'd fallen. They'd serve me food mixed with dirt and laugh when I gagged on it. They told me I was ugly, worthless, that no one would ever want me. And eventually, I started to believe them. A low growl rumbled through Isaac's chest, and his arms tightened around her almost painfully. If they weren't already serving you, I would hunt them down and make them pay for every moment of suffering. But that's the thing, Valeria said softly. They did pay. They paid by becoming exactly what my stepmother taught them to be. Beautiful and cruel and ultimately empty. Morgana is 25 now and has never found a mate because she drives everyone away with her viciousness. Seraphine has had 3 potential mates reject her because beneath her pretty face, there's nothing but spite. They destroyed me, but in doing so, they destroyed themselves too. Isaac cupped her face in his large hands, his touch impossibly gentle. You're not destroyed. You're here, whole and strong and more beautiful than anything I've ever seen. They tried to break you, but all they did was polish you, like pressure turning coal into diamonds. I don't feel strong most days, she admitted. Even now, even as your queen, I wake up sometimes expecting to find that this was all a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back in that cold servant's room, sleeping on a thin mattress with a single threadbare blanket, Then I'll spend every day proving to you that this is real, Isaac promised fiercely. I'll worship you until you believe in your own worth. I'll protect you until you feel safe. I'll love you until you understand that you were never the problem, Valeria. They were. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being truly seen, truly known, and loved anyway. Tell me about you, she said. Tell me about your 300 years. What made you who you are? Isaac rolled onto his back, pulling her with him so she was draped across his chest, her white hair spilling over his dark skin like moonlight. He stared at the ceiling as he spoke, and she could feel through the bond that he was sharing things he'd never told anyone. I was born into war, he began. The packs were scattered and constantly fighting for territory, for dominance, for survival. My father was an alpha, but not the Alpha King. That title didn't exist yet. He was killed when I was 15 by a rival pack, and they slaughtered my mother and siblings too. I survived by hiding like a coward while my family died. Valeria pressed a kiss to his chest, over his heart, offering silent comfort. I swore that day that I would never be weak again, never hide, never show mercy to those who showed none to others. I fought and killed and conquered until the packs had a choice. Unite under my rule or be destroyed. Most chose to unite. Those who didn't regretted it. His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could feel the pain beneath it, the guilt and the rage that had driven him for centuries. I built the Silvercrest Keep on the bones of my enemies, he continued. I established laws with an iron fist, put down rebellions without hesitation, and ruled through fear, because it was the only language the packs understood. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything other than a weapon. I waited for my mate, he said, and now his voice cracked slightly. Every year during the mate ceremonies, I would search the faces of the unmated Omegas, hoping, praying to the moon for someone who could see past the monster I'd become. But year after year, decade after decade, century after century, no one came. And I started to believe I was cursed, that the moon had denied me a mate because I was too stained with blood, too broken to deserve that kind of love. Valeria lifted her head to look at him, and saw something she never expected to see in the eyes of the fearsome Alpha King. Tears. I was so lonely, he whispered. So tired of being alone in a crowded hall, of making decisions that cost lives, of being feared instead of known. I'd started to think that maybe it was better that way, that a mate would just be a weakness that enemies could exploit. And then you walked through those doors. He cupped her face again, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks even as his own fell. You were devastation and dignity, broken and unbreakable. And the moment our eyes met, I felt something I'd thought dead in me come roaring back to life. Hope, purpose, the possibility that maybe I wasn't beyond redemption after all. You're not beyond redemption, Valeria said firmly. You did what you had to do to unite the packs, to end the constant warring. Yes, you were ruthless, but you were also effective. You built something lasting, something that will outlive us both. That's not the mark of a monster, Isaac. That's the mark of a king. Tell me about them, Isaac said quietly. Your sisters, your life before tonight. Valeria nestled closer to his warmth, feeling safe enough now to speak of painful things. Morgana and Seraphine were always jealous. After my mother died, my father remarried, and my stepmother favored her daughters over me. I became the servant in my own home, the one they blamed for everything, the one they could hurt without consequence. His arms tightened around her, and she felt the rumble of a growl in his chest. Never again, he vowed. They'll serve you now, and they'll learn what it means to show respect and kindness. And your father? He stopped seeing me years ago. I think I reminded him too much of my mother, and it was easier to pretend I didn't exist. Then he's a fool. Isaac tilted her face up to his silver eyes fierce in the firelight. You are impossible to ignore, Valeria. You're going to shine so bright as my queen that the entire realm will have to acknowledge you. I don't know how to be a queen, she admitted. Then we'll learn together. I may have ruled for centuries, but I've never had a partner. Never had someone to share the burden. You'll teach me how to be better, and I'll teach you how to command respect. We'll be formidable. She smiled at that. A real smile that felt strange on her face after years of forced compliance. Formidable. I like the sound of that. Sleep, little queen, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Tomorrow the real work begins. But tonight you're safe. Tonight you're mine. And nothing in this world will ever hurt you again. Valeria drifted off in his arms, the steady beat of his heart a lullaby, the warmth of their bond a comfort she'd never known. For the first time in years, she slept without nightmares, protected by the fierce love of her Alpha King. The days that followed were a whirlwind of change and challenge. Valeria woke each morning in Isaac's arms, the bond between them humming with contentment, and had to remind herself that this was real, that she was truly the queen, truly loved, truly safe. But being queen was far more complicated than she'd imagined. The court was a labyrinth of alliances and enmities, old grudges and new ambitions. And many of the established nobles viewed her with suspicion or outright hostility. She was an Omega from nowhere, with no political connections, no powerful family backing her. Her only claim to the throne was Isaac's devotion, and in the brutal politics of wolf packs, love was seen as a weakness to exploit. The first challenge came from Lady Cassandra, a powerful alpha female who had clearly hoped to catch Isaac's eye herself. She approached Valeria in the gardens one afternoon, her smile sharp as broken glass. "My dear queen," Cassandra purred, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You must be so overwhelmed by all of this. A simple Omega, thrust into such a complex world. Perhaps you need a guide, someone to teach you the intricacies of court life." Valeria recognized the trap immediately. Accept, and she would be seen as weak, dependent. Refuse, and she would make an enemy of a powerful noblewoman. She took a breath, calling on the strength she'd developed through years of navigating her sister's cruelty. "How kind of you to offer, Lady Cassandra," Valeria replied, her voice pleasant but firm. "However, I find that the best way to learn is through direct experience, and I have the most excellent teacher in King Isaac, who knows these halls and their inhabitants better than anyone." Cassandra's eyes narrowed. "Of course the king is devoted to you, for now, but devotion can fade, especially when the novelty wears off. You might want to consider what will happen when he realizes he needs more than a pretty ornament at his side." Before Valeria could respond, a deep growl cut through the garden. Isaac emerged from behind a hedge, and the fury on his face made even Cassandra step back in alarm. "Repeat that," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "I want to be absolutely certain I heard you correctly, Lady Cassandra. Did you just suggest that my mate, my queen, chosen by the moon herself, is nothing more than an ornament?" Cassandra's face went white. "Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect. You were simply testing my queen, seeing if you could undermine her while I wasn't present." Isaac moved to stand beside Valeria, his hand finding hers and gripping it tightly. "Let me be abundantly clear, since there seems to be confusion. Valeria is not my weakness. She's my strength. She's not temporary. She's eternal. And anyone who disrespects her, even with the finest sugar-coating of false courtesy, disrespects me." He leaned forward, and his eyes had gone full silver, his wolf very close to the surface. "You have lands on the western border, do you not, Lady Cassandra? Remote lands far from court, where the winters are harsh and long. I suggest you return to them and spend some time reflecting on the proper way to address your queen. Am I understood?" It was exile in all but name, and everyone knew it. Cassandra dropped into a trembling curtsy. "Yes, Your Majesty." Perfectly understood. She fled, and Isaac turned to Valeria, his fierce expression softening instantly. "Are you all right?" "I am," Valeria said, though her heart was still racing. "But you didn't need to exile her. I was handling it." "I know you were." His hand came up to cup her face. "You were magnificent. But I will not tolerate anyone making you feel less than you are. Not ever. That's not weakness, Valeria. That's setting boundaries, making clear what will and will not be accepted in my court. Our court." She leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his certainty. "I'm going to make mistakes," she warned. "I don't know all the rules, all the unspoken games they play." "Then we'll learn together," he said simply. "And anyone who tries to take advantage of your learning curve will answer to me." True to his word, Isaac kept Morgana and Seraphine as Valeria's attendants, and the sisters who had once lorded their beauty and status over her now bowed to her commands. At first, they were sullen and resentful, performing their duties with barely concealed contempt. Morgana, in particular, seemed determined to make her displeasure known. She would take too long to respond to requests, forget important tasks, and sigh dramatically whenever Valeria asked for anything. It was petty rebellion, but it wore on Valeria's nerves. One morning, 3 weeks into her new role, Valeria had had enough. She dismissed the other attendants and faced her sister directly. "Sit down, Morgana," she said quietly. Morgana's eyes widened in surprise, but she obeyed, sinking into a chair with poor grace. "You're miserable," Valeria observed, "and you're making everyone around you miserable too. So let's talk about this, sister to sister, not queen to servant." "Sister?" Morgana laughed bitterly. "You stopped being my sister the day you stole what should have been mine." "I didn't steal anything," Valeria said, keeping her voice calm despite the sting of the words. "The bond between true mates isn't something that can be stolen or given. It just is. Do you really think I plotted all of this? That I somehow manipulated the Alpha King into choosing me?" Morgana was silent, but her jaw was clenched. "You tore my dress," Valeria continued, "because you thought it would prevent him from seeing me, from choosing me. But Morgana, if the bond was there, it would have revealed itself whether I wore silk or rags, or nothing at all. You couldn't have stopped it any more than you can stop the moon from rising." "You're right," Morgana said suddenly, and her voice was raw with pain. "I couldn't have stopped it. But do you know what it's like, Valeria? To spend your whole life being told you're beautiful, being groomed for greatness, being promised that you'll marry well and secure the family's future, and then to watch your youngest sister, the one we treated like dirt, become queen." Tears were streaming down Morgana's face now, years of resentment and disappointment pouring out. "I'm 25 years old, and I have nothing. No mate, no prospects, no future beyond serving the sister I tortured. It's humiliating. It's devastating. And yes, I know I brought it on myself, but that doesn't make it hurt any less." Valeria moved to kneel in front of her sister, taking her hands. "Then let's change it," she said softly. "You're right, you can't change the past. But the future isn't written yet. You could spend the rest of your life bitter and resentful. Or you could choose to become someone different, someone better." "How?" Morgana asked, and for the first time, Valeria saw genuine vulnerability in her sister's eyes. "Start by being kind, not to me, not because I'm the queen, but to everyone. The other servants, the guards, the people you pass in the halls. Practice it until it becomes natural. And as you change, as you become genuinely kind instead of just pretending, maybe you'll attract a mate who sees the person you're becoming rather than the person you were." Morgana stared at her for a long moment. "Why would you help me? After everything I did. Because you're my sister, Valeria said simply. And because I know what it's like to be trapped in a life you hate, to feel hopeless and alone. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, not even you. It wasn't an instant transformation. Morgana still had moments of resentment, still struggled with envy and bitterness. But slowly, gradually, something in her began to shift. Valeria noticed her being gentler with the other servants, offering help without being asked, even smiling occasionally without the edge of mockery. Seraphine's change was different, but equally profound. Where Morgana had been openly hostile, Seraphine had been coldly indifferent, performing her duties with mechanical efficiency but no warmth. It was Valeria's work with the children that finally reached her. Valeria had established schools throughout the realm, places where children from all ranks could receive education regardless of their parents' status. She visited often, reading to the children, listening to their dreams and fears, showing them that their queen cared about their futures. One day, Seraphine accompanied her on one of these visits. As Valeria sat surrounded by a dozen children, reading them a story about a brave Omega who saved her pack, Seraphine watched from the doorway. When the story ended and the children ran off to play, Seraphine approached. "I never knew you wanted children," she said quietly. Valeria looked up, surprised by the almost wistful tone in her sister's voice. "I've always loved children. When we were young, before everything changed, I used to play with the pack children all the time. Do you remember?" Seraphine nodded slowly. "I remember. You were gentle with them, patient. I was always too impatient, too focused on myself." She paused, then added, "I'd forgotten that version of you, the one from before." "She never went away," Valeria said. "She just learned to hide." Over the following weeks, Seraphine began joining Valeria on her visits to the schools. At first, she was stiff and uncomfortable, unsure how to interact with the children. But they had a way of seeing past facades, and they responded to genuine warmth. Slowly, Seraphine found herself laughing at their antics, marveling at their insights, caring about their progress. One afternoon, after a particularly successful lesson where Seraphine had taught the children a traditional wolf song, Valeria pulled her sister aside. "You're good at this," she said. "Really good. Have you ever thought about becoming a teacher?" Seraphine's eyes widened. "A teacher? But I'm your attendant. I'm serving out my punishment." "Your punishment," Valeria said firmly, "was always meant to teach you empathy, to help you understand what it means to serve rather than be served. I think you've learned that lesson. If you want to continue as my attendant, you're welcome to. But if you'd rather find your own path, teach in the schools, make a difference in children's lives, I'll support that." Seraphine's eyes filled with tears. "You're giving me a choice?" "I'm giving you freedom," Valeria corrected. "The freedom to become who you were always meant to be, without the poison our stepmother fed us." When the court gathered that evening, Valeria made the announcement that both Morgana and Seraphine would be transitioning to new roles. Morgana would oversee the household staff, teaching them the high standards she'd learned as a personal attendant. Seraphine would become the head teacher at the main school in Silvercrest. There were murmurs of surprise, even disapproval, from some corners of the court. But Isaac's hand found Valeria's under the table, squeezing gently in support, and she felt his pride through their bond. Later, in the privacy of their chambers, he pulled her into his arms. "You gave them mercy," he said, "more than they deserved." "I gave them a chance," Valeria corrected. "What they do with it is up to them." Isaac pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. "You're teaching me," he murmured. "Showing me that strength isn't always about punishment, that sometimes true power lies in forgiveness and opportunity." "We balance each other," she said simply. "You show me how to be fierce when I need to be, And I show you how to be gentle when you can be. That's what mates do. The true test of their bond came 3 months after the ceremony, when the Northern Territories sent an envoy to challenge Isaac's rule. Alphadane Wolfsbane was a legend among the packs, a warrior who had held the frozen north for 2 centuries, and he'd never fully accepted Isaac's authority over the realm. The confrontation took place in the Great Hall, with the full court assembled to witness. Dane was a massive man, nearly as large as Isaac, with the scarred face of a warrior and eyes that gleamed with cunning malice. "So this is the legendary mate," Dane drawled, circling Valeria where she sat on her throne beside Isaac. "The Omega in rags who bewitched our king. Tell me, little queen, what did you do to trap him? What Omega tricks did you employ?" The court went silent. Isaac's hand gripped the arm of his throne so hard the wood creaked, his entire body coiled with barely restrained violence. But before he could rise, before he could tear Dane apart for the insult, Valeria's hand covered his. She stood, and her presence filled the hall in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it carried, and every ear strained to hear. "Alphadane, you mistake strength for trickery. I didn't trap anyone. The bond between true mates isn't something that can be forced or faked. It simply is, as natural as the moon's pull on the tide. You see my origin as a weakness because you judge worth by outward things, clothing, status, power displays. But real strength lies in surviving cruelty without becoming cruel, in choosing kindness when the world has shown you none. That is the strength I bring to this throne." She stepped down from the dais, and Morgana appeared instantly at her side, having learned to anticipate her sister's needs. Valeria took a goblet of wine from her attendant with a gracious nod, and offered it to Dane with her own hands. "You're welcome in this hall as a fellow alpha," she continued. "But if you've come seeking weakness, you'll find none. What you will find is a united front, a king and queen who complement each other, who are stronger together than either could be alone. I suggest you consider carefully whether you wish to be our ally or our enemy." Dane stared at her for a long moment, the entire court holding its breath. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his scarred face. He took the goblet and drank deeply. "I came here expecting to find a liability," he said. "Instead, I find the Northern Territories would be honored to pledge their loyalty to a queen with such wisdom." He dropped to one knee, and the gesture sent shockwaves through the assembly. "You have it, my queen, and my respect." When he left an hour later with treaties signed and alliances renewed, Isaac pulled Valeria into his arms and buried his face in her white hair. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Prevented a war?" she offered. "You made him kneel. Dane Wolfsbane, who has never bowed to anyone in his 300 years, knelt to you, my beautiful, brilliant mate." She smiled against his chest. "You would have torn him apart if I hadn't intervened." "Without question." His hand tilted her face up, his silver eyes intense. "But you found a better way. You always find a better way. You're teaching me, Valeria. Teaching me that strength doesn't always have to be violent, that power can be gentle and still be absolute. We balance each other," she said simply. "You show me how to be fierce when I need to be, and I show you how to be gentle when you can be. That's what mates do." As the seasons turned and their first year together approached, Valeria's transformation was complete. The timid Omega in rags was gone, replaced by a queen who ruled with wisdom and compassion, but who could also display the steel necessary to command respect. She reformed the laws protecting Omegas, established schools for children from all ranks, and created a council where even the lowest wolves could bring their grievances and be heard. And Isaac, the fierce alpha king who had ruled through fear and strength, learned to temper his iron will with mercy, to seek compromise before dominance, to build rather than simply conquer. Under their joint rule, The realm prospered as it never had before, the various packs finding unity and purpose. But perhaps the sweetest victory was the change in Morgana and Seraphine. A year of serving Valeria, of witnessing her grace and kindness day after day, had cracked open something in both sisters. Morgana, the elder, came to Valeria one evening as she prepared for bed. "I need to say something," Morgana began, her voice unsteady, "and I need you to let me finish before you respond." Valeria nodded, gesturing to a chair by the fire. Morgana sat, her hands twisting in her lap, and for the first time looked vulnerable rather than vicious. "I was cruel to you," she said, the words clearly painful. "Unforgivably cruel. I told myself it was justified, that you were weak and I was strong, that you didn't deserve the things I had. But the truth is, I was jealous. You looked like Mother. You had her kindness, her gentle spirit, and every time I looked at you, I was reminded that she loved you in a way she never quite loved me." Tears tracked down Morgana's face, and Valeria's heart clenched with unexpected sympathy. "I tried to break you," Morgana continued, "but you wouldn't break. And then you became queen, and I expected you to destroy me, to take revenge for everything I'd done. But instead, you showed me mercy. You treated me with respect I hadn't earned. And slowly, I began to understand what strength really means. It's not crushing others beneath you. It's rising above your own pain and choosing to be better." She looked up, meeting Valeria's eyes. "I'm so sorry, Valeria. I'm sorry for the dress, for the years of cruelty, for trying to steal your chance at happiness. You deserved none of it, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your forgiveness." Valeria stood and moved to her sister, kneeling before her so they were eye to eye. "I forgive you, Morgana, not because you've earned it, but because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. We can't change the past, but we can build a different future." Morgana broke down completely then, and Valeria held her as she sobbed, offering the comfort she'd been denied her entire childhood. It was the beginning of healing, slow and painful but real. Seraphine's transformation was different, but no less profound. She found her calling working in the schools Valeria established, her natural charisma and energy making her a beloved teacher. One day, she confessed to Valeria that for the first time in her life, she felt like she mattered for something other than her appearance. "You gave me purpose," Seraphine said. "You could have left me as a servant forever, but you saw potential in me and helped me find it. That's the mark of a true queen." Isaac watched these transformations with quiet satisfaction. "You're collecting people," he observed one evening as they walked through the moonlit gardens. "You find the broken and the lost and you help them become whole. It's your gift. Says the man who found me at my lowest and made me a queen," Valeria countered with a smile. "I didn't make you anything. I simply recognized what was already there." He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her beneath the stars. "You were always a queen, Valeria. You just needed someone to see it." On the night of their 1-year anniversary, Isaac surprised her with a gift. He led her to the highest tower of Silvercrest Keep, where a telescope had been installed, pointed at the night sky. "When I was young," he said, positioning her at the eyepiece, "I used to wonder if my mate was somewhere out there, looking at the same stars, wondering about me. I'd search the constellations for answers, for hope. Look." Valeria peered through the telescope and gasped. Isaac had commissioned astronomers to name a constellation after her, a cluster of stars arranged in the shape of a night-blooming flower. "Valeria's bloom," he murmured against her ear. "So that even after we're gone, even after centuries pass, the stars will remember you. The Omega who became a queen, who changed an entire realm with her kindness and strength." She turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she whispered. "I never knew I could feel this much, be this much, until you saw me. And I never knew I could be more than a weapon until you loved me," he replied. "You saved me, Valeria. From loneliness, from becoming the monster I was afraid I'd become. You saved me." They made love under the stars that night, the bond between them blazing bright enough to rival the constellations, and Valeria felt complete in a way she'd never dreamed possible. 2 years into their reign, on a morning when frost painted the windows in delicate patterns and the world outside was wrapped in winter's embrace, Valeria woke with a strange certainty humming through her bones. She lay still in Isaac's arms, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, and placed a hand over her lower abdomen. There was life there. New life. A spark of consciousness barely formed but undeniably present. She could feel it through the bond she shared with Isaac, could sense the tiny flutter of a heartbeat that wasn't her own. Isaac stirred beside her, his silver eyes opening to focus on her face. Through their bond, he felt her sudden surge of emotion and sat up instantly, concern flooding his features. "What's wrong?" he demanded, his hands already checking her for injury. "Nothing's wrong," Valeria whispered, and tears began streaming down her face even as she smiled. "Everything's right. Isaac, I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, the Alpha King who had faced down armies and conquered territories simply stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then, with a gentleness that never failed to move her, he placed his large hand over her belly, covering hers. "A child," he breathed, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Our child." He pulled her into his arms, and she felt his shoulders shake as he wept. In 300 years of existence, Isaac had never allowed himself to imagine this, to hope for it. He'd convinced himself that his life would be one of duty and loneliness, that he would never know the joy of family, of creating life with someone he loved. "I'm going to be a father," he whispered against her hair. "I'm going to have a family again." The news sent waves of joy through the realm, but also fear through Valeria's heart. She'd never had a real family, never known what it meant to be truly loved by parents. Her own father had been absent, indifferent, and her stepmother had been cruel. What if she repeated those patterns? What if she couldn't love this child the way it deserved? The pregnancy was difficult. Valeria's body, unused to carrying life, struggled with the changes. She was sick constantly, unable to keep food down, growing weak and pale. Isaac became even more protective, barely leaving her side, his anxiety palpable through their bond. It was during one particularly bad night, when Valeria was retching violently and crying from exhaustion, that he finally broke down. "I can't watch this," he said, his voice hoarse. "I can't watch you suffer and be unable to help. Tell me what to do, Valeria. Tell me how to make this easier." She reached for him with a trembling hand, pulling him down to sit beside her on the bathroom floor. "Just be here," she whispered. "That's all I need. Just you, being here with me." He gathered her into his lap, cradling her against his chest, and began to sing. It was a lullaby in the old tongue, a song his mother had sung to him before she died, and his deep voice resonated through her, soothing the nausea, calming her racing heart. As the months passed and her belly swelled, Valeria's fears didn't diminish. They intensified. She would wake in the middle of the night, terrified that she would somehow harm this innocent life, that she would fail at the most important role she'd ever had. Isaac found her one night, sitting in the nursery they'd prepared, her hands on her swollen belly and tears on her face. The room was painted in soft colors, filled with handmade toys and books, a cradle carved from ancient oak sitting in the corner. It should have been a place of joy, but Valeria's fear had turned it into a reminder of all her inadequacies. "I'm terrified," she confessed, when Isaac knelt before her. "What if I'm like my father? What if I can't love our child the way it deserves? What if I look at them and feel nothing? Isaac's large hands covered hers on her belly, and through their bond, she felt the absolute certainty of his love, his faith in her. That's impossible, he said firmly. Do you know how I know? She shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Because you're already loving them, he said, his silver eyes intense. Every fear you have is rooted in love, in the desperate desire to be a good mother. Your father didn't have those fears because he didn't care enough to worry. But you do. You care so deeply it terrifies you. And that terror is proof that you'll be an amazing mother. What if I make mistakes? She whispered. Then we'll make them together, Isaac said, and his voice was gentle but sure. Valeria, I've lived for 3 centuries. I've ruled kingdoms, won wars, made decisions that affected thousands of lives, and I've never been more scared than I am right now, knowing that I'm about to be responsible for this tiny person who will depend on us completely. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers in the gesture that had become their most intimate connection. But I also know that our child will have something I never had, something most children in this realm never have. They'll have 2 parents who love each other, who are united, who will do anything to protect them and help them grow into whoever they're meant to be. That's more than enough, my love. That's everything. When their daughter was born 3 months later, on a night when the full moon hung heavy and bright in the sky, Valeria understood what Isaac had been trying to tell her. The moment the midwife placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, something in Valeria's chest cracked open and flooded with a love so intense it was almost painful. She had her mother's white hair, already thick and lustrous, and Isaac's silver eyes, wide and curious despite having just entered the world. She was perfect. Absolutely perfect, and Valeria couldn't stop the sobs that racked her body as she held her daughter for the first time. Luna, she whispered, naming her for the moon that had blessed their union. Your name is Luna. Isaac sat beside her on the bed, one arm around Valeria, the other hand gently touching Luna's tiny fist. His face was wet with tears, and through their bond, Valeria felt the overwhelming surge of his emotions. Joy, wonder, fierce protective love, and something else, something that felt like healing. She's so small, he murmured in awe. I've never seen anything so small and perfect. In the days that followed, Valeria discovered that her fears had been unfounded. Loving Luna was as natural as breathing, but she also discovered that motherhood was harder than any challenge she'd faced, even becoming queen. Luna cried constantly, and Valeria exhausted herself trying to soothe her, to feed her, to do everything perfectly. It was Isaac who finally made her see reason. He found her one evening, swaying on her feet with exhaustion, tears streaming down her face as Luna wailed in her arms. Give her to me, he said gently, taking the baby before Valeria could protest. He cradled Luna against his massive chest, and his deep voice began the old lullaby he'd sung to Valeria during her pregnancy. Almost immediately, Luna quieted, her tiny face turning toward the sound, her silver eyes blinking up at her father. You need to rest, Isaac told Valeria firmly. You're going to make yourself sick, and that won't help anyone. But she needs me, Valeria protested weakly. She needs you healthy and rested, not exhausted and anxious. He guided her to their bed, still holding Luna with one arm while he tucked Valeria in with the other. I'm her father. Let me be her father. You don't have to do everything alone anymore, Valeria. That's what I'm here for. He spent that night walking the corridors of Silvercrest Keep with Luna in his arms, singing to her in the old tongue, and Valeria slept for the first time in 3 days. When she woke, she found them in the nursery, Isaac sprawled in the large chair with Luna sleeping on his chest, both of them peaceful. The image was so tender it made her heart ache. This fearsome warrior, this king who struck terror into his enemies, was completely at ease with this tiny person. And Luna, barely a week old, already seemed to know she was safe in her father's arms. As Luna grew, the bond between the three of them deepened. Parenthood revealed new dimensions to Isaac's character that Valeria had only glimpsed before. The fierce Alpha King became impossibly gentle with his daughter, his massive warrior's hands capable of the most delicate care. He would spend hours with Luna, teaching her to walk by letting her clutch his fingers, reading to her from ancient texts in his deep, rumbling voice, singing lullabies that made Valeria cry with their beauty. But when threats emerged, when rogue packs attempted to challenge his territory or harm his family, the full force of his protective fury was terrifying to behold. He was a perfect dichotomy: tender father and devoted mate at home, merciless defender against any who threatened what was his. One incident in particular revealed the depths of his devotion and the darkness he was capable of. Luna was 6 months old when an assassination attempt during a state dinner left Valeria with a wound, a graze across her arm from a poisoned blade meant for her heart. The would-be assassin was captured before he could flee, and Isaac's rage was volcanic. Valeria found him in the dungeons, standing before the prisoner's cell, his entire body vibrating with barely contained violence. She touched his arm, and he spun, his eyes more wolf than man. "He hurt you," Isaac growled, and his voice was barely human. "He dared to draw your blood, and for that, I will tear him apart slowly, piece by piece, until he begs for death." "Isaac." Her voice was calm, a soothing counterpoint to his fury. "Look at me." His wild eyes focused on her face, and she watched him struggle for control. "I'm fine," she said firmly. "It's barely a scratch. Don't lose yourself to rage over this. Don't become the monster you're afraid of being." "He threatened you," Isaac insisted, but his voice was more controlled now. "He threatened our daughter, our family. How can I show mercy to that?" "Not mercy. Justice. There's a difference." She stepped closer, her hand on his chest, feeling his racing heart. "Execute him if the law demands it, but don't torture him. Don't let rage make you into something you'll regret. Be the man I fell in love with, the one who's fierce but not cruel." He closed his eyes, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. "You make me better," he whispered. "Even now, when every instinct screams for violence, you remind me of who I want to be." The prisoner was executed swiftly and without cruelty, and security around the royal family was increased. But the incident had reminded them both that their happiness, while deep and true, existed in a dangerous world. As Luna grew, she proved to be the perfect blend of her parents. She had Isaac's strength and commanding presence, but Valeria's empathy and wisdom. At 3 years old, she was already mediating disputes between her dolls with the gravity of a seasoned diplomat, much to her parents' amusement. The realm continued to thrive under Valeria and Isaac's joint rule. The reforms she'd championed took root, creating a society more equal and just than any wolf pack had known. And Isaac's strength ensured that their borders remained secure, that no enemy dared challenge a king who fought with the fury of a protective mate. They added 2 more children to their family, a son named Orion who had his mother's gentle nature, and another daughter, Storm, who was pure wild chaos from the moment she entered the world. On the 10th anniversary of their mating, Isaac took Valeria back to the great hall where they'd first met. It had been transformed for the celebration, but the bones of it remained the same. "Do you remember?" he asked, pulling her close as music played and courtiers danced around them. "I remember being terrified," she admitted. "I remember the sound of my dress tearing, the feel of my sister's hands trying to destroy me. I remember thinking my life was over. And now?" She smiled up at him, her hand coming up to touch his bearded face. "Now I know it was just beginning. They tried to break me, but instead, they pushed me toward you. Toward this life, this love,
this family. In a strange way, I'm almost grateful for their cruelty, because it led me here. You're more forgiving than I am, Isaac said darkly. I still want to make them pay every time I think about it. They have paid, by watching me become everything they tried to prevent, by serving me and seeing the kindness they never showed me return to them. That's a more profound punishment than anything you could inflict. He pulled her into a kiss, deep and possessive, uncaring of the watching court. When he finally released her, his silver eyes were molten. I love you, Valeria Nightbloom Stormcliff. I loved you the moment you walked through those doors in tatters and rags with your dignity intact. I'll love you until the stars fall from the sky and beyond. And I love you, she replied. My fierce king, my gentle mate, my everything. As they danced beneath the same ceiling where their story began, Valeria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd been broken that night, torn down by jealousy and cruelty, stripped of everything except her essential self. But from those ruins, she'd risen, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Every hurt had tempered her, forged her into someone stronger, more compassionate, more complete. And Isaac had been there to see her, to choose her, to love her with a ferocity that matched her own quiet strength. Their children would grow up knowing love, knowing security, knowing that they were cherished. The cycle of cruelty and neglect ended with Valeria and Isaac. In its place, they'd built something beautiful and lasting. Years later, when Luna was preparing for her own mate ceremony, Valeria gave her a dress of crimson silk, embroidered with night-blooming flowers. This was made from the pieces of my mother's dress, Valeria explained. The one your aunts tore apart the night I met your father. I had it remade, restored into something whole and beautiful again, just like me. Luna touched the delicate fabric with reverence. It's perfect, Mother. You'll find your mate tonight, Valeria said with certainty. And they'll love you for exactly who you are, just as your father loved me. Never settle for less than that, Luna. Never let anyone make you feel small or invisible. You're the daughter of an alpha king and a queen who rose from nothing. You're remarkable. That night, as Valeria stood beside Isaac, watching their daughter enter her own mate ceremony, she felt the circle complete. From Omega in rags to queen and mother, from broken to whole, from invisible to unforgettable. Isaac's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture as familiar as breathing. No words were needed. The bond between them hummed with contentment, with the satisfaction of a life well lived and love well earned. The moon rose full and bright over Silvercrest Keep, bathing the realm in silver light. And in that light, Valeria Nightbloom Stormcliff stood tall, no longer the girl whose dress was torn, but the woman who had been covered by her king's cloak, crowned by his love, and made whole by their unbreakable bond. Her jealous sisters had tried to destroy her that night a decade ago, ripping her dress while mates were chosen. But the Alpha King had covered her, not just with his cloak, but with his devotion, his protection, his fierce and eternal love. And in doing so, he'd given her something far more valuable than any dress. He'd given her herself. The end of their story was really just a beginning, for their love would echo through generations, a testament to the truth that real strength lies not in cruelty, but in kindness, not in breaking others, but in building them up, not in tearing down, but in covering with love. And somewhere in the starlit sky, Valeria's bloom constellation shone bright, a reminder that from the darkest nights come the most beautiful dawns. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.